Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if we really have two minds, one that we consciously think with and another that works automatically behind the scenes? This new study dives deep into that very question. Imagine you meet someone, you might think they're great based on what they say or how they act. But what if, deep down, a part of your brain has a completely different feeling about them? Maybe a negative one. This is the idea behind dual process theories in psychology, which suggest that our explicit thoughts, the ones we're aware of, and our implicit feelings, the ones that just pop up, can sometimes be at odds. Back in 2006, a study by Rydell and his colleagues seemed to show exactly this kind of split. They had people learn about someone named Bob. Bob was described with positive behaviors, but participants were briefly shown negative words that they might not have even consciously noticed. The surprising result was that when people rated Bob directly, they liked him. But when a special test called the Implicit Association Test or IAT was used, which is meant to measure unconscious feelings, participants actually disliked Bob. It was like they had two completely different attitudes about Bob. This finding was a big deal because it supported the idea that we can learn things implicitly without even knowing it, and that these unconscious lessons can create feelings separate from our conscious thoughts. But then something interesting happened. In 2018, another research team tried to repeat this experiment, and they couldn't find the same split. Both their direct ratings and the IAT showed that people felt positively about Bob. This raised a big question: were the original findings a fluke, or were there specific conditions needed for this two minds effect to happen? That's where our current study comes in. A large group of researchers, including some who worked on the original study and the replication attempt, decided to rigorously retest this. They wanted to know for sure if the original two minds effect was real and repeatable, or if it was just a one-off finding. So how did they test this? Well, they essentially tried to recreate the original Rydell experiment as closely as possible. They had participants engage in a learning task. Here is the core idea. Participant would see a very quick flash of a word, usually just for milliseconds. This word was either positive or negative. Right after that, they saw a picture of a person Bob and a description of something Bob did. Crucially, the behavior described was always the opposite of the word they just saw. For example, if they saw a negative word like disaster, they might then see Bob doing something good. Then they had to guess if the behavior fit Bob. After this learning phase, they measured how people felt about Bob in two ways. First, using direct questions like, "Do you like Bob?" on a scale. This is supposed to measure their conscious, explicit feelings. Second, they used the Implicit Association Test, or IAT, which is designed to catch those automatic unconscious feelings. The real trick in the original experiment was that the words flashed so quickly participants likely didn't even notice them. This was meant to create an unconscious learning experience. The researchers here paid very close attention to this timing. They ran this experiment in multiple countries and languages to make sure their findings weren't just specific to one place or group of people. They also carefully controlled the timing of the word flashes. Scroll the experimental procedure consisted of 3 components: a learning task, 2 evaluation tasks, and a recognition task. After the learning and evaluation parts, they even did a surprise test to see if people remembered the words they were flashed. If they remembered them, it might mean the words weren't truly unconscious. Scroll following the first round of evaluations, participants completed the second learning block and again evaluated Bob directly and indirectly. After the second round of evaluations, participants completed a surprise recognition test for the briefly flashed words. Now for the results. Did they find that split mind phenomenon the original study reported? Across experiment 1, which closely followed the original study's timing, and experiment 2, where they tried to make the words even less visible, the answer was a resounding no. Scroll in the following valence order refers to the joint order of briefly flashed words and behavioral information. Both the direct ratings and the IT consistently showed that participants liked Bob. Both measures reflected the positive information they received about Bob through the behavioral statements. The briefly flashed words, no matter how fast they were shown, did not seem to create a separate negative feeling in the IAT. Scroll in all labs. Rating scores corresponded to the valence of the behavioral information. Rating scores indicated more favorable evaluations after the first than after the second block, when behavioral information was first positive and later negative. Hence, in all labs, directly measured evaluations corresponded to the valence of the behavioral information and were opposite to the valence of the briefly flashed words. In T and for the IAT, scroll in all labs. IAT scores also corresponded to the valence of the behavioral information. B. This means that for both the conscious ratings and the unconscious EAT, people's feelings about Bob aligned with the clear behavioral information they received. There was no two-mind situation. Scroll directly and indirectly measured evaluations did not dissociate. B. What is really interesting is that even when they tried to make the words even harder to see in experiment 2, using very short flashes of 13 milliseconds, the results stayed the same. At 13 milliseconds, participants couldn't even tell if they'd seen the words or not, which is what the original study found to suggest unconscious processing. But even then, the IA didn't show a negative feeling. Scroll recognition accuracy for the briefly flashed words was at chance level and comparable to that observed by Rydell et al. 2006, hem scroll at 13 milliseconds. Recognition accuracy for briefly flashed words was at chance level and comparable to that observed by Rydell et al. 2006. Deep. So what does this all mean? The researchers here believe that the original two minds finding from Rydell et al. in 2006 is not reliably replicable. Scroll thus, our results raise further doubt about the replicability of the dissociative evaluative learning effect that was reported by Rydell et al. 2006. B. This is important because that original finding was a cornerstone for some theories suggesting that our implicit and explicit attitudes are formed through fundamentally different processes. If that key piece of evidence isn't holding up, then those theories might need a rethink. Scroll present findings provide strong evidence against a key empirical finding predicted by the SEM and taken to support related dual process theories. Instead, the results from this large replication effort strongly support simpler theories that suggest both our conscious and unconscious feelings about something are based on the same kind of learning, which is likely conscious and propositional. Scroll conversely, the findings remove an important challenge to the more parsimonious single-process propositional theories, e.g. De Hauer 2014, Mitchell et al. 2009. It is not that unconscious processing doesn't exist. The study does acknowledge that we can't be 100% sure if the words were completely invisible or if people just didn't remember them consciously. They also mention that direct and indirect measures might have different strengths, meaning explicit ratings might show stronger effects than the IRT scroll notably. We cannot rule out the possibility that dissociations between implicit and explicit evaluations could be observed in other experimental designs, including studies that similarly pit learning effects resulting from stimuli with brief versus longer presentation durations. DB scroll on this note. We recommend that relevant future research adhere to current standards for research on unconscious processing. But the big takeaway is that the specific effect Rydell et al. Observed, where quickly flashed negative words reversed feelings on an IAT while explicit ratings stayed positive, doesn't seem to hold up when tested robustly. Scroll to conclude, across two high-powered experiments conducted across multiple countries and languages, we found overwhelming evidence against the dissociative evaluative learning effect originally reported by Rydell et al. 2006 COB scrolled together with results from previous replication attempts by Heycke et al. 2018, these results show that this effect is replicably non-replicable and should no longer be treated as evidence in support of dual-process theories of evaluative learning, sir. So, what is my take on this? I think this study is a fantastic example of the scientific process at work. Science is all about testing ideas, and if those ideas don't hold up under scrutiny, we revise them. This large-scale replication effort, involving many researchers in multiple countries, adds a lot of confidence to the finding that the original two minds dissociative effect might not be a robust phenomenon. It highlights the importance of transparency in research and the value of large collaborative projects to really nail down whether a finding is reliable. The real-world implication here is that we might not be as divided internally as we thought. Our conscious and unconscious minds might be more in sync than some theories suggested. This doesn't mean we don't have automatic reactions, but perhaps the way these automatic reactions are formed and interact with our conscious thoughts is simpler than previously believed. Future research could explore other ways to create these implicit and explicit evaluations. Perhaps different types of learning or different measurement tools could reveal subtle differences. It is also crucial to continue refining how we measure awareness of stimuli, as that seems to be a tricky part of this whole research area. What do you guys think about the idea of our minds being more unified than split? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into psychology, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained. We'll see you in the next video.